Well, Alistair and Bryan, we're here. Our topic is Sermon Preparation 101. And I know that there's a lot of pastors that, whether they're young or old, that would benefit with just a little counsel about what does it mean to be faithful and effective in sermon preparation. So I think between the three of us, all three of us have been preaching for decades.
Yep.
And yet I'm guessing at the same time that none of us has moved beyond some basic things that need to happen every time you do sermon preparation. So just weigh in, Bryan. Tell us some of the things that haven't changed in all of these years, basic sermon preparation, things that need to get done.
It takes time, more time than I like to share, and more time than I think people who are not regular preachers understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when people start preaching at times, they think, if you're really good at this, you'll pull this off in an hour and a half and you'll just be ready to roll.
Right.
And at least I can't do that.
Right.
It takes me, early on, it would easily take me 20 hours a week. It takes me now probably 8 or 9 hours to get a message.
So you can get better at this.
You can get better at it, but I don't think you can preach quality messages.
Quicker at it.
You get quicker at it. That's right.
Right.
But it takes me. I'm not the Spurgeon. The famous story that he would, invite people to dinner the night before, talk it over, and that was his preparation.
Right.
That's not me. I have to be able to sit down and study and crack the books.
Right.
It scares me.
Yeah.
It does. Am I going to come up with something that will touch people this week? Am I going to see what needs to be here?
Right.
And it just takes me time to build a message that I feel is true to the Word and that I'm confident in as well.
Alistair, are there steps that you could describe? These are the things that I do in my sermon preparation.
Yes.
The large-scale steps.
Large-scale steps.
Yeah.
Well, just in responding to what Bryan's saying, that there's a sense in which, when does the sermon preparation start? I mean, it starts when you say the benediction on Sunday night.
That's right.
That's the sort of, that's the glory of it and the challenge of it, that as soon as you say amen, now you have a blank sheet of paper, you have the next section of your Bible. And maybe we ought to just first of all say that at least in my case, my standard pattern is to work systematically and consecutively through a book or a section of the Bible. And not everybody starts there. And I think it's a good discipline, and it's also a safeguard against all kinds of things. But in coming to the text, I found something from an elderly preacher years ago that I thought was at least a good framework. I deviate from it and amend it in some ways, but it goes like this: that I start off by coming to the text, whether I can go to my Greek New Testament, I can go to Hebrew. If people have a facility in that, and a real facility in it, then they can do it. Most people don't. As time goes by, unless they're really working with the languages, they're fooling themselves. And people have done the hard work for us, so why fiddle with it? But anyway, depending on who we are.
Yes. Our faculties would love your why fiddle with it. They'll cheer you when you say that, Alistair.
No, but I still have my original Greek New Testament. But my handwriting on it looks like I was a 7-year-old boy that wrote my name in there, and it was me. But that was 40 years ago. Right. So come to the text and pray. Lord, here we go again.
Yes.
And then I spend some time trying to think myself empty, and I'll just go through them and read myself full.
Yes.
Write myself clear.
Yes.
Pray myself hot.
Yes.
And then be myself and forget myself in the delivery.
Right.
So
wonderful.
So
there's a little sermon preparation menu right there.
Yeah.
Where in that process, and maybe both of you guys can mention this, where does the whole issue that, especially for young preachers, is a big question, the reading of commentaries, the reading of supplement, where, when, how much? Bryan?
Well, Alistair and I are going to agree on this. I tend to advise people not to make a commentary the first thing you do, where you end up preaching somebody else's thoughts or experience. So I encourage what Alistair said. Pray about it, read, digest, think, whatever is your method of making sure you have deeply thought about the text in the context of the people the Lord has given you to minister to.
That's good.
And in doing that, I think you then are going to check your work and deepen it by the commentaries. But you don't want to preach a dead or distant man's sermon. And I think thinking it through first yourself, saying, God called me to be here, not that other person. So I need to steward that calling and thinking and praying about it first myself.
So there's really more going on in sermon preparation than you kind of coming to some conclusion about a text. You might do your text work, arrive at destination X, read the commentary, and see it's X. I could have saved all of that time by just reading that commentary.
Right.
But what would you have lost? This working of the text in your own heart, which is essential for your effective preaching.
Well, you don't want to skip the fun of exegesis
That's
either.
right.
I mean,
That's right.
it's a fun thing, isn't it, to not just immediately have somebody unpack the text for you, especially, I find it virtually impossible to read somebody like John Stott without then concluding there is no better way to exegete this passage. I mean, because he's so masterful at that.
Yes.
Not everybody is as good as him, so you can get away with it. But, and also the challenge of trying to find what the big thought is in this passage. What is the, Spurgeon used to say, it's better to hammer home 1 10-penny nail than 25 pin tacks that fall out within the hour.
Right.
It's much easier just to come up with 25 pin tacks. It's harder to isolate that. And it's also a little scary because you might not be right.
Yeah.
And then that's where the commentary can come in and say, no, this would be a wrong emphasis.
That's right. So the commentary does serve to correct at times.
And guide.
And
supplement.
Also, and doesn't it also help you to engage in conversation about your text? I mean, we've all had the experience of talking with someone about our sermon ahead of time and that clarifying our thoughts and helping us to articulate. And I think that's what a commentary does, doesn't it? It helps you to engage in a conversation with somebody else who's thought carefully about your text.
I find if I can think, what difference will this text make to people or a person in the congregation? So I'm thinking about significance as well as meaning.
Right.
That gets me excited about the text. The commentary then begins to either check or inform my excitement.
Good.
But I don't want to be going to the commentary before I'm actually excited, enthused about this can actually benefit, help God's people for this reason. Now I want to gain, as it were, resources and fuel for that purpose, rather than expecting the commentary to begin to fuel that purpose.
Right.
But,
Excellent.
there's a couple of safeguards as well. We want, and Bryan, I think we would agree on this too, that the real question is not where am I in this passage. The congregation's role is not to try and find themselves in the passage. The question is, as we were mentioning earlier, is where is Christ in this passage? And so another little framework that I have is asking the question, what? And then asking the question, so what? And then asking the question, now what? So that when we come to the text, what is it saying? So what, if that's what it's saying? And now what will it mean in relationship to the congregation that God has given me?
And maybe even using those kinds of questions as a sermon preparation menu as opposed to some sort of kind of steps one has to do. But think about one's obligations.
I don't know what it was like for you at Trinity or at Covenant, but as I go around, I'm amazed to see that the homiletical departments are virtually separate entities from the biblical theology. And I think that homiletics should be taught within the context of biblical theology, because all the things that we were talking about earlier need to be worked out and then expounded. And I talk to young fellows, and they go to the class, and the person tells them, you have to have this amazing beginning, and they spend all their time trying to think of this amazing start to the sermon. And then when you hear their sermon, it's not as good as the start, because they needed to spend a hard time on the text, not on how you come up with a great illustration.
Right. Well,
for me, Mike, if Alistair mentioned preaching through a book. I think that helps people so much in terms of knowing what I'm going to do next. And not spending so much time in a given week just thinking, what am I going to do next? Knowing in some planning mechanism where you're going helps a lot of make sure there is that consistency of quality, because I know where I'm going and I'm not staying all the time just wondering.
Right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Alistair, you shared something with us a moment ago that might be a good word for us as we think about this task of sermon prep.
Yeah, the old guys are often the good ones, aren't they? This is Alexander Somerville, who was one of Murray McShane's closest friends, and it's kind of archaic language, but just a couple of things. He says, remember, you're going to speak to souls who must either be impressed or hardened by the sermon you deliver. And remember, the flock of Christ must not be fed with ingenuities, but with the bread of life.
Yeah, wonderful. Excellent.